The wind in the Wyoming territory did not know how to whisper. It was a roarer, a shouter, a thief that stole the breath from your lungs and the warmth from your bones. Maeve O'Hara knew this wind. She knew it as she knew the ache in her lower back from the wagon's constant jolting and the smell of alkali dust that clung to everything. She was a widow, an immigrant from an Ireland that felt 1,000 lifetimes away. And she was, at present, an interpreter and field medic for the Overland Stage Company. It was a job that paid, which was more than most could say. She pulled her thick wool cloak tighter. It was a good cloak, bought with 2 months' pay, and it was her best defense against the cold that was already creeping down from the Bighorn Mountains. Winter was coming, not with a gentle warning, but with a clenched fist. The town of Dry Willow, visible now as a smudge of gray wood and thin smoke in the distance, looked as if it were bracing for a blow. Maeve O'Hara was not looking for a fight. She was looking for a place to set her feet where the ground would not shift beneath her. She had been a wife, then a widow, then a survivor. Now, she just wanted to be a person who earned her keep and could look another in the eye without fear or favor. She wanted dignity, a thing as rare and as precious as clean water in this high, dry country. The stagecoach rattled into the single dusty street of Dry Willow, and the passengers, a mix of weary miners and a tight-lipped salesman, stumbled out. Maeve stayed behind, her gaze fixed on the small group huddled near the station's water trough, a Cheyenne family. The mother held a small boy, and her face was a mask of rigid fear. The father stood beside her, his hands empty but his eyes missing nothing. Maeve stepped down, her medical satchel bumping against her hip. The station master, Jed, a man whose face was a roadmap of worry, hurried over. Best stay clear. Maeve, he muttered, not meeting her eye. Marshal Voss is in a mood, says they cannot draw water here. The child is sick. Jed, she said, her voice quiet but carrying. The Irish lilt was still there, softened by years in America, but stubborn. She approached the family. The mother flinched, pulling the boy closer. Maeve stopped a few feet away, holding her hands up, palms out. She spoke, not in English, but in the Cheyenne tongue she had painstakingly learned. It was a language of the earth, of breath and wind, and she knew she spoke it with the clumsiness of an outsider, but she spoke it with respect. I am a healer, she said. Your son, he is in pain. The father stepped forward. He was a tall man, built of long muscle and quiet intensity. His eyes, dark and piercing, assessed her, not as a woman, but as a potential threat, or perhaps a potential anything. This was Chayton Redhawk. He had been a warrior. He had ridden in battles that were already being turned into lies in the cheap newspapers back east. Now, he was something else, a scout, a mediator, a man walking a razor's edge between the world of his ancestors and the new, loud world of iron and greed that was crushing it. His one purpose, the thing that woke him each morning and haunted his sleep, was the protection of Willow Creek Valley. It was the last green, sacred place. It was the heart of his people. And he knew, with the certainty of a man who watches the sky for storms, that the white men were coming for it. He said nothing, but he watched Maeve. He watched her as she knelt in the dust, her cloak pooling around her. He watched as she spoke again, her voice a low murmur to the mother. Let me see, the fever can be broken. The mother looked at her husband. Chayton Redhawk gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. Maeve's hands were gentle as she examined the boy. He was small, perhaps 5 winters old, and his skin was hot to the touch, a nasty cut on his arm, gotten from a fall or a piece of rusted wire, was inflamed, the infection spreading. I have medicine, Maeve said, opening her satchel. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound with carbolic soap and water she had Jed fetch, her movements efficient and practiced. The boy whimpered, but he did not cry out. Chayton watched her hands. He watched the focus in her green eyes. He had seen white women before. They looked through his people, or at them with fear, or with a strange, greedy curiosity. This woman looked at the boy. When she was done, she wrapped the arm in clean linen. She rose, her knees cracking, and met Chayton's gaze. He needs to stay warm. He needs broth. The fever will last the night, but the infection is cleaned. You are paid for this, he asked. His English was perfect, clipped, learned at a mission school he had long since burned from his memory. I am paid by the stage line, Maeve replied. Matching his directness, I am not paid for this. This is my work. A silence settled between them, thick with the things they were not saying. The wind howled, a low-bellied beast, and Chayton pulled his own blanket tighter. He was a man who understood protection. Maeve saw, tucked into the worn leather belt at his waist, a knife. The handle was wood, carved with the patient, beautiful detail of a hawk in flight. It was not a tool of war, not entirely. It was a piece of him. The valley, he said, his voice low, meant only for her. They say there is silver in Willow Creek. I have heard the talk, Maeve said. There is no silver. There is only water and grass and the bones of our grandmothers. Then why the talk, she asked, though she already knew the answer. Because a lie is a good key to unlock a door, and a man named Silas Greeley holds the key. Maeve nodded. Silas Greeley, the railroad baron. He was a ghost in Dry Willow, a name spoken in the saloon and the bank, a man who owned futures and bought souls with paper. His shadow fell long, all the way from Cheyenne, and it was growing darker, and where Greeley's shadow fell, his man, Marshal Voss, was quick to follow. Voss was the law, which meant he was the man with the heaviest fist and the quickest gun. All sanctioned by a tin star. He ran the town for Greeley, using the bank to push taxes, to call in debts, to squeeze the small ranchers and homesteaders until they broke, and he hated the Cheyenne with a cold, righteous fury. He used them as the bogeyman, the excuse for every misfortune. A rumble from the saloon signaled that Voss had found his afternoon whiskey. You should go, Chayton said to her. He was not asking. He was stating a fact of survival. And you, Maeve asked, packing her satchel. We are not welcome at the fire, he said, his eyes turning to the town, but we will not freeze. He gave her another nod, the same clipped, final gesture. He gathered his small family, the mother lifting the now sleeping boy, and they moved away from the station, fading into the gray dusk that was swallowing the plains. Maeve watched them go, a knot tightening in her stomach. She went inside the station, the warmth of the big pot-bellied stove hitting her face. It was a false warmth, a temporary shelter. The men inside, the drivers and telegraph operators, were talking. Heard it from a fella in Laramie. One said, spitting tobacco juice into a cuspidor. Greeley's bringing the new branch line right through here. Says there's a silver strike up in the creek. We are all going to be rich. Another man, older, nursing a cup of watery coffee, shook his head. The only ones who get rich from a strike are the ones who sell the shovels, or the ones who own the land before the strike is even found. That land is treaty land, Jed muttered, pouring Maeve a cup. Treaties, the first man scoffed. Treaties are just paper waiting for a new signature. Ask Marshal Voss. He will tell you. That land is going to be civilized. Maeve drank her coffee, the bitterness scalding her throat. She thought of the small boy's hot skin, the mother's fear, and Chayton Redhawk's eyes. Eyes that had seen too much war and were now forced to mediate a peace that was just another kind of battle. A man at the back table, a freighter, chimed in. This town has bad luck with progress. Remember that warehouse fire last spring, the one full of homesteaders' supplies? Voss called it an accident. But I saw the tracks. Shod horses, riding hard. Just before the flames went up. Looked like a way to clear out folks who would not sell to the bank. The conversation died as the door opened, letting in a gust of freezing air and Marshal Voss himself. He was a broad man, his bulk filling a tailored coat, his face red with drink and authority. His eyes scanned the room, cold and assessing. "Jed," he boomed. "You let those savages water their horses. They just took a little—" "Marshal," Jed stammered. "A little is too much. This is a white town. You remind them of that." His eyes landed on Maeve. He did not like her. He did not like her quiet, her education, or the way she spoke that heathen tongue. "Ma'am," he said, "a mockery of respect. Best you stick to your white patients. We do not want trouble here." "I stick to the sick." "Marshal," Maeve said, her voice steady. "Sickness does not care what color a man is." Voss grunted, a sound of displeasure. He turned and left, his spurs ringing on the wooden floor. The station was silent for a long moment. Maeve finished her coffee. She felt the weariness of the road settle deep into her marrow. She was an outsider here, just as she had been in Ireland, just as she had been in the crowded, dirty cities back east. She had her job, her cloak, her satchel of medicines. It was not enough. She looked out the window into the darkness. She thought of Chayton Redhawk and his family. Out there in the wind, he was fighting for his home, for the bones of his grandmothers. Maeve O'Hara was just looking for a home, a place where her own bones might one day rest in peace, a place where she could stand for something more than just her own survival. She thought of the hawk-carved knife, a small piece of beauty and identity in a world that sought to grind both into dust. She touched the small pouch at her own belt. It held her papers, a few dollars, and a locket from her dead husband, tools of a life that was. Out on the plain, Chayton Redhawk looked back at the single, blurry light of Dry Willow. He held his son, the boy's fever a familiar, terrible heat against his chest. He knew what was coming. The railroad, the miners, the soldiers. They were a winter storm of their own, and they would not stop until they had taken everything. He had to stop them, not with war, for war had only ever brought ghosts and empty bellies. He had to fight them with their own weapons, law, paper, words. And as he looked at the light, he thought of the white woman with the sad green eyes and the good hands, the one who spoke the language of his people and who had met his gaze without flinching. She was a flicker of warmth in the cold, a small, unexpected thing, and in the fight to come, he knew he would need every unexpected thing he could find. The wind roared, carrying the first sharp needles of ice. The long night was just beginning. 3 days later, the storm broke. It had been threatening for a week, a heavy gray blanket snagged on the peaks of the big horns, and now it tore open. The snow came not in gentle flakes, but in a horizontal, blinding assault. Maeve O'Hara was inside the stagecoach, wedged between a nervous-looking banker from Cheyenne and the same salesman from her previous trip, who smelled faintly of whiskey and fear. The coach itself was a small, fragile box of wood and leather, fighting a losing battle against the wind. Maeve had been on this route for 6 months, and this was the worst she had seen it. The driver, a young man named Tom, was good, but no man was a match for this kind of weather. They were in the High Pass, a notorious stretch of road carved into the mountainside, with a sheer drop on one side and a wall of rock on the other. The snow was already a foot deep, drifting higher in the hollows. "We should have stayed in Dry Willow," the banker, Mr. Henderson, said, his voice thin. "This is madness." "We have a schedule, sir," Maeve said, though her own stomach was tight with unease. "The line runs. No matter the weather, Tom will see us through." But even as she said it, a different sound cut through the howl of the wind. It was not a natural sound. It was a human yell, sharp and guttural, followed by the unmistakable, terrifying crack of a rifle shot. The coach lurched to a violent halt, throwing them all from their seats. The salesman screamed. Outside, Tom yelled, "Whoa, whoa!" And then there was a second shot, this one closer, and a heavy thud as Tom's body hit the roof of the coach before sliding off into the snow. "Oh, God! Oh, God!" the banker moaned, pulling his knees to his chest. "Stay down," Maeve commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. Her medical training, her time as a widow fending for herself, it all clicked into place. Fear was a luxury. Action was survival. The coach door was ripped open, and a blast of snow and freezing air filled the cabin. A man stood there, his face covered by a burlap sack with eye holes cut out. He held a long-barreled shotgun, and it was pointed directly at Maeve's chest. "Get out, all of you! Get out now!" he roared, his voice muffled by the sack. Maeve looked past him. There were 4 of them, all masked, all heavily armed. They looked less like road agents and more like a poorly disguised posse. "Do as he says," Maeve said, keeping her voice calm. "Move slowly. Mr. Henderson, you first." The banker scrambled out, falling to his knees in the snow. The salesman followed, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unlatch his grip from the seat. Maeve came last, her medical satchel held tight in one hand. The box, another man, this one on a horse, shouted. "He was the leader, and your valuables. Now." The banker fumbled for his wallet. The salesman was weeping. Maeve looked at the men. Their clothing was rough, but their boots were not. The leader, the one on the horse, wore knee-high cavalry boots, the kind soldiers wore, and his horse, a big roan, was shod with military-style shoes, distinct in the fresh snow. "What about the woman?" the man with the shotgun asked, his eyes, visible through the sack, fixed on Maeve. "She is part of it." "Get her bag," the leader ordered. "No," Maeve said. The man with the shotgun stepped toward her. "Give me the bag." "Woman." "There is no money in it," Maeve said, her heart hammering but her voice steady. "It is medicine. There is a child dying of cholera in the next town. This is the medicine to save him." It was a lie. There was no cholera, but it was a believable lie. A plague lie. The man hesitated. He looked back at his leader. "She is lying," the leader snarled. "Get the bag." "If you take it, you are murdering that child," Maeve said, holding his gaze. "Is that what you are, a child murderer?" The man with the shotgun stopped. In the distance, through the swirling snow, Maeve saw movement, a shadow, silent and fast, moving on the ridge above them. "Forget the bag," the leader shouted, his voice suddenly tight with a new urgency. He seemed to have seen the shadow too. "Get the box and let us go." One of the men had already pulled the strong box from the boot. He slung it over his saddle. "This is a warning," the leader yelled. "Not at them, but at the empty landscape. This is what happens when you let the red savages run free. This is Cheyenne work." He fired his rifle into the air. A signal. The 4 men mounted their horses and galloped away, disappearing into the white curtain of the storm. For a full minute, there was no sound but the wind and the salesman sobbing. The banker was white-faced, staring at the spot where the men had been. Maeve went to him. "Are you hurt, Mr. Henderson?" He shook his head, unable to speak. Maeve turned and ran to the front of the coach. Tom was lying face down in a snowdrift, a dark red stain spreading beneath him. Maeve turned him over gently. The shot had taken him high in the chest. His eyes were open, staring sightlessly at the storm. He was dead. A cold, hard anger settled over Maeve, pushing the fear down. This was not a robbery. Robbers took valuables. They had left the passengers' money, taking only the strongbox. This was a performance, a brutal piece of theater. This is Cheyenne work. "They were not Cheyenne," she said, her voice flat. "What?" the banker stammered, climbing to his feet. "Of course they were." "You heard him. They were white men," Maeve said, standing up. "They wore soldiers' boots. Their horses were shod like cavalry horses. Cheyenne do not shoe their ponies that way, and they spoke perfect, unaccented English." "She is right," a new voice said. The voice came from the rocks above. Chayton Redhawk moved down the slope, materializing from the snow like a spirit. He moved without sound, his face grim, his eyes missing nothing. He was not wearing a heavy cloak, but a buffalo-hide robe, and he seemed untouched by the cold. He stopped beside Maeve and looked down at Tom. His face tightened. He looked at the tracks the horses had left. Then at the boot prints Maeve had already noticed. "Army boots," he said. He knelt, touching a print, and the horseshoes, Fort Laramie issue. "Chayton," Maeve said, a small jolt of relief mixing with her shock. "How did you find us?" "I was tracking the storm. And them," he pointed to the tracks of the riders. "They rode from Dry Willow 2 hours before dawn. I have been behind them ever since. I was too late to stop this." "You mean they were from the town?" the banker whispered, his face pale with a new kind of fear. "They are Marshal Voss's men," Chayton said. It was a simple statement of fact. Maeve felt the blood drain from her face. It made a terrible kind of sense. The strongbox, the fake robbery, the immediate blame. "We have to get back," Maeve said, her mind racing. "We are all freezing, and we have to take Tom with us." The lead horses were tangled in their harness, but the coach was undamaged. Chayton, with a strength that was both swift and economical, calmed the horses and checked the rigging. Maeve and the banker, with great effort, lifted Tom's body and secured it in the boot. "We cannot go back the way we came," Chayton said. "The pass will be drifted shut, and they will be watching the main road. There is another way, a deer trail. It will take us to the station by nightfall." He took the reins. Maeve climbed up onto the driver's seat beside him, pulling her cloak tight. The banker and the salesman scrambled inside the coach. "You will be cold," Chayton said, not looking at her. "I have been cold before," Maeve replied. "Drive." For hours, he guided the heavy coach through a landscape that was invisible to Maeve. He seemed to sense the path rather than see it, following rock formations and the slope of the land. The storm howled around them, a living entity that wanted them dead. They did not speak. Maeve watched his hands on the reins, strong and sure. He was a man of the earth, and she, a woman of cities and books, felt a profound, grudging respect. He was fighting for his world. She was just trying to find a footing in hers. They reached the station well after dark, a small point of light in a universe of swirling white. Jed burst out, his face a mask of relief that turned to horror when he saw them pull Tom's body from the boot. They had been inside for less than an hour, huddled around the stove, when Marshal Voss and 3 of his deputies arrived. They had not ridden from the pass. They had ridden from town. "Heard there was trouble," Voss boomed, shaking snow from his coat. He looked at Maeve, at the banker, his eyes sharp. "Cheyenne. Was it?" The banker, Mr. Henderson, looked at Maeve, then at Chayton, who stood silently in the corner of the room. The banker was a man of money, a man who understood which way the wind of power blew. "Yes, Marshal," Henderson said, his voice shaky but firm. "It was savages. They killed Tom. They said it was a warning." Maeve felt a cold sickness rise in her throat. "That is a lie," she said, her voice quiet. The room went silent. Voss turned his full attention to her. "What did you say, ma'am?" "I said that is a lie. They were not Cheyenne. They were white men. They wore army boots. They rode army-shod horses. I saw them." Voss's face darkened. "Ma'am, you must be mistaken. The shock, the cold, it has confused you. We all know who's responsible for this. I am offering a reward, $50, for the capture of the savage murderers who did this." The station, which had been warming, was suddenly ice cold again. The men in the room, the drivers, the telegraph operator, they looked at Chayton, and their eyes were hard. $50, one of them said. "Let us ride, Marshal. Let us clean them out of Willow Creek for good." "Let us burn the whole camp," another shouted. "This is what we get for being soft on them." The raw, ugly voice of the mob filled the small space. Chayton did not move. He simply watched, his face an unreadable mask. But Maeve saw the muscles in his jaw clench. He was seeing it again. She knew. The memory of war. The smell of smoke and blood. The old, tired story repeating itself. "Enough," Maeve shouted, and her voice cracked like a whip. The men quieted, surprised. "You are being played for fools," she said, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and cold. You want to blame them? She pointed at Chayton. Because it is easy. But the men who killed Tom are the same men who want that valley. The same men who will promise you silver and give you a railroad, and who will own every last one of you before you even know you have been bought. She looked directly at Voss. You know I am telling the truth. Marshal? Voss took a step toward her. His face was no longer red, but a pale, dangerous white. Mrs. O'Hara, you are overwrought. I am going to have to ask you to retract that statement. You are interfering with an official investigation. And you are consorting. He said the word like it was filth, with a known savage. This was it. This was the line. Maeve felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She could be silent. She could keep her job, her small, precarious place. She could let the lie stand, or she could speak. She looked at Chayton. He had saved them. He had brought them out of the storm, and now he was standing here, alone, ready to be swallowed by their hate. I will not retract it, she said, her voice low. I will not be silent. Voss's eyes glittered. Then you are a fool, ma'am, and a liar. Men, we ride. Go back to your camp, savage. The next time we see you, it will be at the end of a rope. Voss and his men, and half the men from the station, stormed out, their hearts full of righteous, false anger. The station was quiet. Jed, the banker, and the salesman were left, and Chayton. Chayton walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the latch. Where will you go? Maeve asked. To my people, to warn them. They will come for you. They have always come for us. He turned to face her. The mask was gone. In his eyes, she saw a weariness so profound it was almost bottomless. But beneath it, there was a core of iron. You spoke the truth. It was a brave thing, and a dangerous one. They will not forgive you for it. I am not looking for their forgiveness, Maeve said. She picked up her satchel. The lie about the cholera had been instinct. This was a choice. You cannot stop them, Chayton said, not with words. No, Maeve said, not with words. With proof. She thought of the boots, the horseshoes. The tracks are covered by the storm, but they were sloppy. They were overconfident. They left something. Or they will. You are trying to save your valley. I am trying to see justice for a dead man. I think we are walking the same path. He looked at her for a long time, the sound of the wind filling the silence. He was a man who had learned to trust no one, especially not a white face, but he had seen her. He had seen her with his son. He had seen her in the snow. They want to push my people out. Then they will take the land. This, he said, gesturing to the storm, this is what they used. But the snow melts. The truth is underneath. Help me find it, Maeve said. It was not a plea. It was a demand. Help me find the proof that Voss and Greeley are behind this. Help me save your valley, and maybe, just maybe, we can find some justice in this godforsaken country. Chayton Redhawk looked at this small, fierce Irish woman, who smelled of carbolic soap and cold air. He had seen the hawk-carved knife at his belt. She, too, had a spirit that knew how to fight. He gave his short, sharp nod. Tomorrow, at dawn, by the old cottonwood. Come alone. We will find this proof, or we will die trying. He opened the door and was gone, swallowed by the white fury of the night. Maeve stood at the window, watching the snow. She was an outsider. She was an immigrant, a widow, a woman alone, and she had just declared war on the most powerful men in the territory. She realized with a strange, cold calm, terrified, and she had never felt more alive. The sound of a hammer on wood echoed through the cold, clear air of dry willow. It was 2 days after the attack on the stage, and the town was gathered. The snow was packed hard on the ground, and the sky was a painful, cloudless blue. Silas Greeley had arrived on a special engine, and he had not wasted a moment. The meeting was called on the steps of the general store, the only building large enough to hold the town's fear and greed. Silas Greeley was not a big man. He did not look like a man who moved mountains and rerouted rivers. He wore a fine wool suit from back east, a pearl gray vest, and a look of profound, sympathetic concern. He stood on a platform of hastily nailed boards. Marshal Voss stood behind him, a solid wall of armed authority. "Friends," Greeley began, his voice surprisingly powerful. "Neighbors, I come to you in a time of tragedy." He bowed his head. "We have lost a good man. Tom, the driver, was a friend to this line, a friend to progress, and he was murdered. Murdered by a brutal, savage element that wishes to keep this land in the dark ages." A low murmur of agreement went through the crowd. "This cannot stand," Greeley continued, his voice rising. "We are civilized people. We are builders. And the answer to savagery is not retreat. It is civilization. The answer to chaos is order. The answer, my friends, is the railroad." He unrolled a large map, weighting it down with rocks. It was a beautiful, hand-tinted drawing. It showed the railroad line, a thick black snake coming right through dry willow. And it showed a spur, a new line, branching off and heading straight for Willow Creek Valley. "But what is in the valley?" someone shouted. "I am glad you asked." Greeley smiled. He held up a second document. "This is an assay report. From men I trust. My surveyors have found what the natives have been hiding from us for generations. Silver, not just a little, a veritable river of it." A stunned silence, then a wave of excited chatter. "Now, the railroad needs land," Greeley said, holding up a hand, "and this unfortunate, tragic attack, it proves we need the railroad. We need the soldiers it will bring. We need the security. This valley, this sacred land they talk about, is nothing but a staging ground for murderers." The crowd was with him. He had them. "I am prepared," Greeley announced, "to purchase the access rights, to build this spur, to turn Dry Willow from a way station into a city. But I cannot do it alone. The bank," he nodded to Mr. Henderson, the banker from the coach, who stood pale-faced in the crowd, "is opening a railroad prosperity fund, a way for every one of you to invest in this future, to show the world that we are united." A woman stepped forward. She was the most elegant person in town, Sadie Donovan. She was Mr. Henderson's wife, but everyone knew she was the one with the steel spine. Her family in the East was wealthy, and she had not let the frontier diminish her sense of status. She wore a dark blue velvet dress, absurdly fine for the dusty street, and a look of grim determination. "Mr. Greeley is right," Sadie said, her voice clear and cutting. "My husband and I, we were on that coach. We saw the terror. This is not about just us. It is about our security. My husband's bank will be the cornerstone of this new fund. We must protect what is ours. We must show these people that we will not be driven out. This is our home." She was driven by a cold fear, not of the Cheyenne, but of failure. The bank was over-leveraged. The homesteaders were defaulting. Greeley's railroad was the only thing that could save her husband, and preserve the life she had built. If that meant endorsing a lie, she would do so, while the town was being sold its prosperous, silver-lined future. Maeve O'Hara and Chayton Redhawk were picking through the frozen, wind-scoured site of the ambush. The dawn meeting had been brief, a quiet exchange of nods in the pre-dawn chill. Now, they worked. The snow had covered much, but Chayton moved like a man reading a hidden language. He did not look at the obvious. He looked at the base of the trees, at the hollows where the wind would have deposited things. "Here," he said, his voice a low puff of steam. He was crouched by a cluster of pines, 100 feet from the road. It was where the shooters had waited. Maeve joined him, kneeling in the snow. He pointed with a gloved finger. Not at a footprint, at a small brass object half hidden in the pine needles. "A shell casing." Maeve picked it up. It was heavy, not from a hunting rifle. she murmured. Sharps, Chayton said. Army issue. The kind the cavalry carries. Not the kind of gun a road agent uses. And not the kind my people have. He continued his search, scanning the ground, the trees, the air itself. Maeve watched him, impressed by his methodical, patient focus. He was not just looking, he was understanding the story of what had happened here. Then Maeve saw it, a scrap of leather, dark against the snow, tangled in the branches of a bush near where the horses had been tied. She pulled it free. It was a piece of a bridle, snapped off when a horse had pulled back too hard, and stamped into the leather, faint but unmistakable, was a mark U.S. United States, Maeve said, her voice shaking, not from cold, but from anger. It is from a cavalry bridle. They had their proof. It was small, but it was real. It was iron and brass. They rode back, not to the town, but to the stage station. They found Jed inside, his face gray with worry, nervously sweeping a floor that was already clean. Maeve, he said, his voice a low whisper. You should not be here, and you should not be with him. He glanced at Chayton, who remained outside, a silent shadow by the horses. Jed, we know who did it, Maeve said, closing the door. It was Voss, his men. Jed's face crumpled. I knew it, I knew it. What did you see? Jed Maeve pressed, gently. You were here. You must have seen them leave. Jed looked at the door, terrified. They will kill me, Maeve, or burn me out, like they did the homesteader's warehouse. They will kill us all. Jed, just slower. Tell me. He finally broke. The words came out in a rush. I saw them. Marshal Voss and those 3 deputies he hired last month, the ones with the mean eyes. They rode out, hours before dawn, hours before the coach was even due. They were not wearing their stars. They were carrying rifles, and they had sacks over their saddle horns. I thought they were going on a long patrol. But they rode toward the pass, not the valley. You are a brave man, Jed, Maeve said, grasping his arm. I am a coward, he whispered, and now I am a dead man. His words were prophetic. The station door burst open. Marshal Voss stood there, his face flushed with the success of the town meeting. He was flanked by the same 3 deputies Jed had described. Well, well, Voss said, his eyes taking in Maeve. Then Jed. He ignored Maeve. Jedediah, you have been a busy little bee. Have you not whispering stories? I do not know what you mean. Marshal, Jed stammered. I mean, Voss said, stepping inside, that I am arresting you. For what Maeve demanded, stepping in front of Jed. For conspiracy, ma'am, for spreading lies to undermine a federal investigation, for aiding and abetting the Cheyenne murderers by trying to point the blame elsewhere. He shoved a piece of paper at Jed. You are under arrest. You cannot, Maeve said. This is insane. He has done nothing. He has done plenty. Voss's deputies grabbed Jed, who offered no resistance. They dragged him out the door. And as for the station, Voss said, turning to Maeve, we will need to search it for evidence of his conspiracy. It was a violation. His men turned the place upside down. They dumped the telegraph keys, threw ledgers on the floor. One of them, a man with a scarred face, picked up Maeve's medical satchel. What is in here? Ma'am. Potions, messages for your friends. He dumped it, scattering her carefully rolled bandages, her laudanum, her scalpels, across the dirty floor. Maeve said nothing. She was frozen with a pure, cold rage. Chayton, who had seen the arrest from outside, had melted back into the shadows. Voss watched her. You are on a dangerous path. Mrs. O'Hara, your friend out there, he jerked his head toward the window, is no longer welcome in this town, and neither are his defenders. He walked out. A few minutes later, he was nailing a new, crudely lettered sign to the post office, No Cheyenne permitted within town limits, by order of Marshal Voss. Penalty is arrest. The town had its villain, and now Voss had his prisoner. Maeve, her hands shaking, repacked her bag. The gossip had already started. She could feel it as she walked to the general store for supplies. The same people who had smiled at her last week now looked away. Whispers followed her. Seen her riding with him, alone, an Irish woman. You know, they are half wild themselves, disgraceful. Siding with those things over us. Jed was a fool to listen to her. Sadie Donovan saw her from across the street. Maeve met her gaze. Sadie held it for a moment, an expression not of malice, but of cold calculation, then turned away. She had made her choice. Maeve had, too. She was an outcast, the very thing she had feared. That night, she met Chayton in the old, drafty livery stable at the edge of town, the only place they could be safe. The smell of hay and horses was a small comfort. "He has Jed," Maeve said, her voice tight. "He is silencing the ones who know," Chayton replied. He was watching the stable door, his body coiled and alert. "It is worse. I heard it at the store. Silas Greeley gave a final notice. His surveyors are coming to drive the first stakes in Willow Creek in 3 days. Chayton turned to her. The news hit him like a physical blow. 3 days. The papers will be signed. The law will say it is his. They will bring soldiers. "Then we have to stop them before the law says it is his," Maeve said, her mind racing. "Our proof, the shell, the leather." "It is nothing," Chayton said, the frustration clear in his voice. "It is our word against the marshal and the railroad." "It is not enough," Maeve agreed, "but it tells us where the real proof is." "The lies are big, Chayton, and big lies need paperwork. They need ledgers and maps and telegraphs and orders. The strong box they stole, it was a prop. But the orders to steal it, the money to pay for it, that is all real. And it is all in one place." He looked at her, and he knew exactly what she was saying. "The marshal's office," he said. "He has Jed's life in his hands. He has your valley in his hands. And he has all the proof locked in his safe. You are talking about breaking into the jail, stealing from the marshal. Voss is not the law. He is a criminal hiding behind a star," Maeve said, her voice fierce. "I am not talking about stealing. I am talking about taking back the truth. We save Jed. We save your land." He was silent for a long time, the only sound the wind whistling through the broken boards of the stable. He was a man who had lived by one code. She was asking him to break another. "It is a fortress," he said finally. "Then we find a way in," Maeve said. "We have to. We are the only ones who will." He looked at her, this woman who had lost everything and was now willingly throwing away the little she had left for a man she barely knew and a people that were not hers. "We will need help," Chayton said. "Jed has friends, and I know the dark places in this town." "We have 2 days until the surveyors," Maeve said, the plan forming, sharp and dangerous. In her mind, we plan tonight, we act tomorrow. He gave his short nod, a pact, a commitment. They were no longer just two people walking the same path. They were tied together, and the rope was pulling them toward a fire. The town of Dry Willow had 2 clocks, the one in the saloon, which was always 10 minutes fast, and the one in the church steeple, which was always 3 minutes slow. True time lived somewhere in the quiet agreement between them. That night, Maeve O'Hara and Chayton Redhawk were moving on church time, slow, deliberate, and under the cover of God's own darkness. They were not alone. Their small conspiracy had grown by 3. Dr. Elias Thorne was a man who had seen too much death from bullets and whiskey, and he had a quiet fondness for Jed's checker playing. He carried his medical bag, not for the break-in, but as a cover. "A doctor's visit," he'd said, his voice dry as dust. "To the jail, to check on the prisoner's health. Marshal Voss is a stickler for procedure, after all." Reverend Gideon, a man whose sermons about fire and brimstone were a thin cover for a deep and troubling compassion, was with them. He believed Jed was an honest soul, and he believed Maeve's version of the truth, which he called God's unvarnished light. The third was a man named Finn. He was a reformed cowboy, which meant he had simply found that drinking and brawling paid less than mending fences, which is what he did for the stage line. He missed Jed, who owed him $2 from a poker game. He was there to get his friend and his money. Voss and his deputies are at the saloon, Finn whispered, his breath a cloud in the alley behind the marshal's office. Greeley is buying a round for the whole town, celebrating the Prosperity Fund. They will be there for an hour, at least. Chayton did not need an hour. He moved to the back window of the evidence room. It was not a jail cell, but a simple office. The lock was cheap. He did not break it. He used a thin piece of wire he carried, and with a patience that was almost reverent, he worked the mechanism. Maeve watched his hands. The same hands she had seen gentle a spooked horse and carve a piece of wood. In less than a minute, there was a quiet click. He slid the window open without a sound and was inside, a shadow detaching itself from the greater darkness. He helped Maeve over the sill. Her heart was a cold hammer against her ribs. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke, gun oil, and paper. "The Reverend and I will watch the front street," Dr. Thorne murmured. "Finn, the alley. If you hear a low whistle, like a whippoorwill, you have 1 minute." "We will be quick," Maeve promised. Chayton lit a small stub of a candle, shielding the flame with his body. The office was small, dominated by a heavy desk and a large iron safe. "The safe," Maeve whispered. "It will be in there." "We do not have time for the safe," Chayton said. "Voss is a proud man, and a lazy one. He keeps his recent work close." He ran his hands over the desk. It was locked. He did not bother with the wire. He used the flat edge of his hunting knife as a lever, put his shoulder into it, and with a single, sharp crack of wood, forced the central drawer open. They worked in the small pool of candlelight. They found ledgers, they found warrants, and they found the lies. "This is it," Maeve said, her voice trembling as she held up a piece of paper. "A warrant for Jedediah, for conspiracy. It is not signed. There is no judge's name. It is just Voss's signature." "Here," Chayton said, his voice grim. He held up a bank ledger. Receipts, payments to J.D., Sorrell, and T.G., the 3 deputies. The payments were listed as surveyor protection. And the deposits, large ones, came from a holding company Maeve had never heard of. But the signature on the authorization was clear. Silas Greeley. "They did not even bother to hide it," Maeve said, sickened. They did not think anyone would look. Chayton continued to search. He found a rolled map at the back of the drawer. He unrolled it. It was the map of Willow Creek Valley, but it was not a real survey. It was a crude drawing and marked across the sacred land. In red ink was the word silver. "The fake map?" Maeve said. The proof he showed the town. They took it all. The unsigned warrant, the bribery ledger, the map. They were stuffing the papers into Maeve's satchel when they heard it. A low, long whistle, like a sad bird in the night. "Time," Chayton said. He snuffed the candle. He pushed Maeve toward the window. She was halfway out when she saw it, tucked under a blotter on the desk. A telegraph. It was a draft, not yet sent. From Voss to Greeley. Prisoner secured. Town primed. Awaiting final instructions. She grabbed it. She was out the window in a second. Chayton followed, pulling the window shut. They were running down the alley, meeting Finn, just as the saloon doors opened. A block away. Spilling light and loud. Drunken voices into the street. They had it. They had the truth on paper. They spent the rest of the night hiding the documents, separating them. Maeve gave a set to the Reverend to hide in his church Bible. She kept the most damning, the ledger, on her person. The next morning, the world changed. It began as a low rumble, a vibration felt in the soles of the feet before it was heard by the ears. Maeve was with Chayton, just outside the town, near the small, wind-beaten camp where his people were now forced to live, cut off from the town's supplies. She had brought what medicine she had, and some food she had bought with her last few dollars. The rumble grew. It became a thunder. The ground was shaking. Chayton was on his feet in an instant, his head tilted, listening. His face went rigid. "Buffalo," he said. "They are coming fast, and they are coming this way." He ran to the crest of the small hill. Maeve followed. The sight made her blood freeze. It was a river, a black, roiling river of shaggy hides and horns, pouring down from the foothills. It was not a migration. It was a stampede, and they were heading directly for the camp. "The loggers!" Chayton snarled, pointing to the hills. "Greeley's men. They have been cutting timber for the railroad. They spooked them." There was no time for anger. He ran into the camp, shouting in Cheyenne. There was no panic in his voice, only urgent, sharp command. He was not a warrior now. He was a protector. He directed the women and children to the small, rocky creek bed, the only solid cover. He sent the few men, and some of the older boys, running with blankets. "We cannot stop them," he yelled over the growing thunder. "We have to turn them, just a little. Fire! We need fire!" The men lit the blankets, creating a wall of smoke and flame at the edge of the camp. Chayton stood in front of it, a small, brave man against an avalanche of flesh. He was turning the led animals, his arms wide, his voice a sharp cry. But the herd was too big. It split. A part of it veered away from the smoke, but a smaller, panicked group broke through, thundering past the teepees. A woman screamed. A small boy, the same one Maeve had treated just days before, had been knocked down. He was not trampled, but a falling lodge pole, struck by a panicking horse, had pinned his leg. The last of the buffalo were gone, leaving a trail of destruction and a terrible, ringing silence. Maeve ran to the boy. Chayton was there, lifting the heavy pole, his muscles straining. Maeve knelt, her satchel already open. The boy's leg was twisted at a bad angle. The bone was broken, a compound fracture, the white splinter of it visible through the torn skin. The boy's mother was sobbing, an old woman, the matriarch of the camp, with a face like a beautiful, dried apple, stepped forward. Her eyes were hard as she looked at Maeve. "Let me," Maeve said, her voice calm and sure. She looked at the mother. "I can help him, but you must hold him. Hold him and sing to him. He must not move." For the next hour, in the dust and the chaos, Maeve O'Hara worked. She had no chloroform, no proper tools. She had only her hands, her knowledge, and her will. She cleansed the wound, her precious carbolic soap stinging the raw flesh. She forced the bone back into alignment with a sickening, wet click, the boy screaming once, a terrible, high sound, before his mother's song drowned him out. She splinted it with pieces of the broken lodgepole and wrapped it in every clean bandage she owned. Her hands were covered in the boy's blood. She was steady. She was focused. She was a healer. When she was done, she sat back on her heels, exhausted. The boy was pale, but he was breathing steadily. The old woman, the matriarch, had watched the entire thing without blinking. She came forward and placed a gnarled hand on Maeve's shoulder. She spoke in Cheyenne, her voice like stones rolling in a dry creek. "Your hands," she said. "They are strong. They are not white hands. They are medicine." She began a low, humming chant. It was a healing song, a blessing, and she told Maeve the story. "Chayton," she said, nodding to her grandson, who was now directing the repairs to the camp, "is the eagle. He flies high. He sees the truth, but the eagle drinks from the stream. The stream flows on the ground. It cleans the wound. It gives life. Even when the world is broken, you are the stream. An eagle cannot fly without water. This was the highest honor she could give. Maeve had not just earned their respect, she had earned her place. From a distance, on a ridge far above the town, Sadie Donovan watched through a pair of opera glasses. She had been riding, a habit she refused to give up. She had seen the dust of the stampede, and she had seen Maeve O'Hara, a small figure in a dark cloak, kneeling in the dirt of the Cheyenne camp, working with a courage that Sadie could not comprehend. Maeve had nothing. She had no status, no money, no fine house. She was an outcast. And yet, she was acting with more power and more dignity than anyone Sadie had ever known. Sadie lowered the glasses, a cold, unfamiliar feeling twisting in her gut. It was shame. The news of the stampede reached Dry Willow, but it was overshadowed by a new, more immediate disaster. That evening, as the sun was setting, the town's central food storehouse, the building that held the winter provisions for half the families, burst into flames. It was a tinderbox. The fire was hot, fast, and total. By the time the bucket brigade formed, it was too late. They could only watch as their winter food, their security, turned to ash. Marshal Voss was there, his face a mask of righteous fury in the orange light. "This is their answer," he roared, pointing not to the hills, but to the Cheyenne camp. "They are cut off, so they burn us out. They are trying to starve us, to make us weak. It is an act of war." The lie was perfect. The town, already panicked by the silver talk, the ambush, and the stampede, now faced a winter of starvation. Their fear turned to a single, ugly point of rage. "It was them," a man shouted. "I saw one of them, a shadow, running from the back." "They are murderers." "And she is with them," another voice. One of Voss's deputies yelled, "That Irish woman. She was in their camp all day. She is a spy, a traitor." The mob turned. It was no longer a group of neighbors. It was a single, many-headed beast. They grabbed torches from the fire. They grabbed ropes. "The station!" someone screamed. "She is at the station!" Maeve was, in fact, in the alley behind the station, meeting Chayton, who had come to warn her of the fire and the rising anger. They heard the mob before they saw it, a roar of boots and curses. They were trapped. The alley was a dead end. The mob poured in. Their faces, the faces of men she had known, looked alien and terrifying in the torchlight. There they are, the savage and his whore. "Get a rope." Voss was at the back, watching, a small smile on his face. This was his true power. Chayton pushed Maeve behind him. He drew his hawk-carved knife. He would not die in an alley. "No," Maeve said, grabbing his arm. "Do not. That is what he wants." The mob surged forward. And then a sound, a small, creaking noise. To their left, a heavy wooden gate. The back gate to Sadie Donovan's immaculate garden swung open. No one was there. It was just open, an escape. Chayton saw it. He did not hesitate. He grabbed Maeve's hand, pulling her from the light into the deep, cultivated darkness of the garden. He bolted the gate from the inside. They heard the mob crash against the wood, yelling in frustration. They were safe, for a moment. Standing in Sadie Donovan's rose bushes, the smell of ash and roses mixing in the air. They were two people from different worlds, bound by a shared enemy and a growing, unspoken trust. Maeve's hand was still in Chayton's. She pulled it away, not because it was wrong, but because the spark of warmth in the cold darkness was almost too much to bear. They still had a long, long way to go. They crouched in the dark, in the impossible neatness of Sadie Donovan's garden. The smell of roses was thick, almost suffocating, mixed with the acrid smoke of the town's burning future. The mob was a beast, still raging on the other side of the high fence, but for a moment, they were safe. "She let us in," Maeve whispered, her voice rough from the smoke. She did not want a lynching on her property. Chayton said, his voice a low growl, "It is not clean." He was probably right. But Maeve held on to the image of the opening gate. It was a choice, a small, strange act in a world gone mad. They did not stay. They moved like shadows through the ordered flower beds, over a back wall, and into the labyrinth of alleys that was their only refuge. Their first stop was the small, hidden root cellar behind the church, where Reverend Gideon insisted on keeping spirits, by which he meant potatoes, and hidden beneath them, a small store of communion wine. It was cold, damp, and safe. Dr. Thorne was there, along with Finn, the cowboy. "Jed is still in that cell," Finn said, his usual humor gone, replaced by a sullen anger. "They were going to string you both up. They will blame this fire on you, and they will blame it on him." "They are right about one thing," Maeve said, her voice hard. "We have to get him out, not just to save him, but because he is the only other white man who saw Voss's men ride out. His testimony, with our proof, is the only thing that matters." "The jail is locked down," Dr. Thorne said, rubbing his tired face. "After what you found, Voss will have his men on high alert. We cannot break in again, not with force." "Then we do not use force," Maeve said, the plan forming, sharp and cold. In her mind, we use fear. Their fear. She looked at the doctor. A marshal may not fear a bullet, but he fears a plague. The next morning, Dr. Thorne, his face set in grim, professional lines, marched to the marshal's office. Maeve, carrying her medical satchel, was at his side, playing the part of the meek, cowed assistant. The scar-faced deputy, the one who had dumped her bag, was at the desk. Voss was nowhere to be seen, likely coordinating the investigation into the fire. "We are here to see the prisoner," Dr. Thorne said, his voice a low command. "As his physician." "He has no physician," the deputy sneered, "and he has no visitors." "He is a citizen, you fool," the doctor snapped. "And he is my patient, and I was told he has a fever. I am here to ensure it is not contagious." He let the word hang in the air. The deputy's sneer faltered. He lived in a time when a cough could wipe out a town. "He is fine," the deputy said, but his eyes darted to the cell block. "We will be the judge of that." Maeve stepped forward, her voice trembling, but not with fear, with a calculated performance. "Doctor, I heard him. From the alley. The cough. It sounds like the one my cousin had, back in Boston. The one that turned the skin black." Black cough. The deputy stood up, his hand moving to his gun, as if he could shoot a disease. "Do not be an idiot," Dr. Thorne said. "It is probably nothing, but if Jedediah dies in that cell of typhus, or smallpox, or God knows what, it is your name on the report. Voss will hang you for letting it spread. Now, open the door." The bluff worked. The deputy, pale and suddenly very eager to be elsewhere, fumbled for the keys. He unlocked the main cell block door and stepped back, pulling a handkerchief over his mouth. 5 minutes, and do not touch anything." He left the main door ajar, standing guard in the outer office, a safe distance from the imagined plague. Jed was huddled on a thin cot in the back cell, his face a mess of bruises. He looked up, his eyes wide with terror, then relief. "Maeve, doctor, they said I—" "Quiet, Jed," Maeve said, moving to his side. She was not just acting now. He was burning with a real, if minor, fever from the cold and the beatings. "We are getting you out." While Dr. Thorne loudly examined Jed, complaining about sanitation and febrile humors for the deputy's benefit, Maeve scanned the cell. There, tucked under the thin mattress, was a folded piece of paper. She grabbed it. "What is that?" Jed whispered. "What is this?" Jed Maeve asked, unfolding it. Jed squinted. "I saw the other deputy, the scar-faced one, writing. He left it. I hid it. I thought it might be something. It was a new ledger, a list, but this was not about money. It was a roster of names, 10 of them. Beside the list, a heading, Hired Surveyors, from Cheyenne. And below, a list of supplies. 10 Sharps rifles, 500 rounds, 10 horses, 1 wagon, provisions, and a final note. Advance payment $200. Balance on completion. Maeve's blood ran cold. This was not a bribe. This was a contract. A contract for a private army, a mercenary force, hired to do what Voss and his deputies could not, or would not, do publicly. "They are not surveyors," Maeve whispered, the full, ugly truth crashing down on her. "They are a death squad. They are going to wipe out Chayton's camp." "We have to go," Dr. Thorne said, his voice urgent. He had seen the paper over her shoulder. At that moment, a crash came from the alley behind the jail. A horse whinnied in panic. "What the hell is that?" the deputy yelled from the outer office. It was Finn and Chayton, the other half of the plan. "Sounds like a horse is loose," Maeve yelled back. "You had better check it." The deputy, torn between fear of plague and fear of Voss's anger over a lost horse, cursed and ran out the front door. Now Maeve said, but they were not leaving. Chayton appeared at the back door of the cell block, the one he and Finn had just broken. He was not there for Jed. He was there for the main key ring, the one the deputy had left hanging on the hook in his haste. Chayton grabbed the keys, found the one for Jed's cell, and opened it. "Take him," Chayton said to the doctor and Finn. "Take him to the church cellar. Hide him, now!" Jed was on his feet, unsteady but alive. He and Finn and the doctor vanished out the back. Chayton and Maeve were left alone in the cell block. He was holding the mercenary contract. "This is the truth," he said. "It is not enough if we are the only ones who know it," Maeve said, her mind racing. "He has given them a deadline. We have to tell the town, all of them, now." "They will not listen," Chayton said. "They will lynch you." "They will listen in God's house," Maeve said, her jaw set. "It is Sunday." The church was full. The fire and the threat of starvation had brought even the most heathen townsfolk to their knees. Reverend Gideon was in the pulpit, his face pale, his sermon on the sin of bearing false witness weak and faltering. He knew half his congregation was guilty of it. Silas Greeley was in the front pew, looking for all the world like a pillar of the community, his head bowed in prayer. Sadie Donovan was beside her husband, her face a mask of perfect, icy composure. The main doors of the church slammed open, crashing against the walls. Maeve O'Hara stood in the doorway, her hair wild, her cloak streaked with ash. Chayton Redhawk was at her side, not behind her, but beside her. He was armed only with his knife and his presence. The congregation gasped as one. This was a sacrilege. "Reverend," Maeve said, her voice ringing in the sudden, absolute silence. "I must interrupt your sermon. You are preaching about false witnesses. I am here to show them to you." "Maeve, this is not the place," the Reverend began, his voice trembling. "This is the only place," Maeve said, walking down the aisle. Chayton stayed at the door, a guardian. "You are all afraid. You lost your food. You are being told to blame the Cheyenne. You are being lied to." "She is possessed," a woman shrieked. "She is a traitor, Marshal Voss, standing at the side, put his hand on his gun." "I am a widow," Maeve said, her voice dropping. And suddenly every person in the church was leaning in to hear her. "And I am an Irish woman. I know what it looks like when a powerful man steals a poor man's land. He finds a reason to call him a savage first." She held up the ledger from Voss's office. "This is the payment from Silas Greeley to Marshal Voss's deputies. For the murder of Tom. For the attack on the stage." A roar of disbelief. "Lies," Voss shouted. Maeve held up the other paper. "The mercenary contract. And this is the list of surveyors, Mr. Greeley has hired a list of rifles, a list of ammunition. This is not a contract for silver. It is a contract for a massacre. He is not going to move the Cheyenne. He is going to murder them. For land. For a lie." She was looking at Silas Greeley. The railroad baron stood up. He did not shout. He smiled. A sad, disappointed smile. "Mrs. O'Hara," he said, his voice full of a terrible, paternal pity. "Your grief, your passion, it has unhinged you. You have been consorting with these people. They have twisted your mind. You all see the danger, the fire, the attack, this instability. It proves my point. The land must be secured." He turned to the congregation. "I had hoped to do this with paperwork, but Mrs. O'Hara, in her hysteria, has shown that the threat is immediate. The federal order has been approved. The residents of the Willow Creek encampment," he said the word with legal, chilling precision, "have 48 hours to vacate the territory. After that, they will be considered hostile, and Marshal Voss and my own private security force will remove them." The air left the room. It was done. He had used her truth and twisted it into his final weapon. "You cannot," Maeve whispered. "It is done," Greeley said, "for the good of the town." Maeve was cut off. She had lost. The townspeople were looking at her, not with anger now, but with fear. She was the one who had brought this on. "This house," a voice said, "strong and clear, will not be used for this." Reverend Gideon stepped down from the pulpit. He was shaking, but he stood tall. "This woman, Maeve O'Hara, came to me with the truth. I was a coward, and I told her to be patient. I was wrong. She has a right to speak, and I will not have my church, God's house, be the place where a warrant for murder is signed." He stood beside Maeve in the aisle. It was a small, brave, and utterly useless gesture. The town was already turning away. They had their orders. That evening, the small group of conspirators met in the livery stable, the air thick with the smell of defeat. Jed was there, safe for now, but shaking. "It is over," Finn said, kicking a bale of hay. "He won." "No," Maeve said. She was sitting on an upturned bucket, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She was staring at the hawk-carved knife Chayton had given her, the one she now carried tucked in her belt. It was a reminder of courage. He has not won. He has just shown his hand. Chayton was watching her. He had been silent through the whole thing. He stepped forward and, in the dim light of the single lantern, he laid his hand on her shoulder. It was not a romantic gesture. It was a warrior's gesture, an acknowledgement, a sharing of strength. His hand was warm, and it steadied the tremor she had not even realized was shaking her. "You spoke with the heart of your people," he said quietly, "but this is not a fight we can win here. The law in this town is a lie. The law in the territory, that is a different matter." Maeve looked up, her mind, which had been numb with defeat, suddenly sparking. "The district court, in Laramie." "It is 60 miles, Dr. Thorne said, his voice heavy. "And the river is up. The North Platte is a flood. The pass will be a sea of mud. You will never make it." "We will make it," Maeve said. Standing up, the fatigue was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She picked up her satchel and began to fill it with the papers, the ledgers, the contract, the map. "We have the proof. We have Jed. He is a living witness. Greeley has given us 48 hours. That is all we need." She looked at Chayton. "He can take Jed on the paths. I will take the coach. With the doctor. A medical transport." "No," Chayton said. "Voss will be watching you. He will be watching me. He will expect us to run. We go together, all of us, in one wagon. We take the proof, and we pray to your God, and to my spirits, that the flood does not take us first." They did not wait for dawn. To leave in daylight was suicide. They left at 2 a.m, in the heart of a new storm. This one not of snow, but of cold, driving rain. They took a heavy-duty freight wagon from the livery, one of Finn's borrowed assets. Finn himself drove, his face a mask of concentration as he guided the team of 4 mules through the sucking mud of Dry Willow's single street. The town was blind, its windows dark, its righteous anger asleep. Dr. Thorne sat beside Finn on the driver's bench, a shotgun across his lap, its presence looking both absurd and necessary on the small, precise man. Inside, under the soaked canvas cover, it was a world of shifting shadows and misery. Maeve, Chayton, and Jed were crammed in with the evidence, which was wrapped in oilcloth and stowed in Maeve's medical satchel. Jed was feverish and half delirious, his head, which Maeve had bandaged, bumping against the side of the wagon. Chayton was a coil of silent tension, his rifle resting across his knees. He sat near the back flap, his eyes scanning the darkness they were leaving behind. Maeve sat opposite him, her own body aching with cold, trying to brace Jed against the worst of the jolts. The rain was a deafening drum on the canvas. It was a biblical, land-sinking rain, turning the entire territory into a primal soup of mud and water. They made it 5 miles from town, 5 miles of grueling, slop-filled battle. The mules were strong, but the world was stronger. The wagon, which had been lurching through a wide, flat basin, gave a final, grotesque sigh. The left rear wheel sank, not just to the axle, but past it, into a sinkhole of mud that had not been there that morning. Finn's curses were immediate and inventive. He and the doctor climbed down, sinking to their knees in the frigid slurry. "It is no good," Finn yelled over the wind. "After 10 minutes of trying to dig it out, we are stuck fast." Chayton was already out, moving through the rain. He returned a moment later, a shadow against the gray. "There is a line shack," he said, his voice quiet but carrying over the storm. "A half-mile east, on the ridge. We can take shelter. We cannot stay here." It took an hour of nightmare. They had to half-carry Jed, who was a dead weight, his fever making him mumble about telegraph keys. They took the mules, huddling them on the lee side of the small, derelict hut. They took the precious satchel. The wagon, and all its contents, had to be abandoned to the mud. The line shack was barely a building. It was one room, caked with old dirt, smelling of rat droppings and ancient, cold smoke. But it had 4 walls and a semblance of a roof. Finn, practical and grim, used his hatchet on a rotted section of the wall to get dry tinder, and in minutes, he had a small, sputtering fire going in the rusted-out stove. The 5 of them huddled around it, a miserable, desperate collection of fugitives. Dr. Thorne immediately tended to Jed, forcing some laudanum-laced water down his throat to quiet him and ease the pain. Finn went to check on the mules, his shotgun never leaving his arm. It left Maeve and Chayton. They sat on opposite sides of the stove, the small, flickering firelight catching the planes of his face, the weariness in hers. The rain on the tin roof was a constant, roaring companion. "He will not die from this," Maeve said, her voice hoarse. She was talking about Jed, who had finally lapsed into a pained sleep. Chayton was not looking at Jed. He was looking into the small, wavering flames. He was running a whetstone along the blade of his hawk-carved knife, the rhythmic shh, shh, a counterpoint to the storm. "So much killing," he said, his voice so low she had to lean in to hear him. "It is the only thing this land knows, the only thing your people brought with them." "It is not my people," Maeve said, a flare of the old defensiveness. "I am not—" "You are not," he agreed, stopping her. He looked at her. "But you are here, in the middle of it, like me." He put the stone and the knife down. "I was at a place the soldiers called Sand Creek," he said. The name dropped into the small hut like a physical weight. Maeve had heard of it. A massacre, a camp of women and children. "I was a boy, not much older than my son. I saw things that a man is not meant to see, things that burn the soul, leaving it a cinder. For a long time, I lived only for that, for the cinder, for the hate. I rode with the dog soldiers. I fought. I was good at it. I made widows. I made orphans." His face was a mask of old, cold grief. "Maeve, I thought I was defending my people," he continued, his voice flat. But I was only feeding the violence. I was becoming what they said we were, a savage. When my son was born, I looked at his hands. They were perfect. They had never held a weapon. I swore I would not let the cinder consume him. I would not let it consume me. So I stopped fighting. I started talking. And I have been failing. Every day since. He was not asking for pity. He was giving her a piece of his truth, a thing more valuable than any paper in her bag. Maeve felt her own defenses crumble. The cold, the fear, the loneliness of her own life. It all rose up. I came here, she said, her voice thick, because my husband died. In Ireland. We were nothing. We were the dirt under an Englishman's boot. He starved, and I watched him starve. I came to America with his wedding ring and one dress. I thought it would be different. I thought free meant free. She gave a small, bitter laugh. But it is just a different kind of boot. Here, I am the Irish woman. I am the widow. I am a woman alone, which means I am either a prize or a target. I am not a person. I am just a thing to be used. By the stage line, by men like Voss, even by the people in town. Before, I was a curiosity. I am so tired. Chayton, I am so tired of being seen as less. I just wanted a place to stand, to be. He had stopped seeing her as the Irish woman. He was just looking at her, at Maeve. The silence in the hut was no longer empty. It was full of the two broken, fighting souls who sat within it. The fire was dying, the small room growing colder. The shack was too small. The wagon was gone, but there was a small space in the corner, a pile of old, musty tarpaulins that had been used to cover freight. We must sleep, Chayton said. The morning will come, and they will come. Finn and the doctor were already asleep, slumped against the wall, exhausted. Jed was quiet. Chayton moved to the corner, shaking out the stiff, heavy canvas. He laid one piece on the dirt floor and held the other. He was not looking at her with heat. He was looking at her with a profound, quiet understanding. Maeve moved to his side. She was shivering, not just from the cold. He did not touch her. He simply held the canvas open. She lay down on the makeshift bed, pulling her cloak tight. He lay down beside her, not touching, but close, the space of a hand's width between them. He pulled the second heavy canvas over them both. It was not warmth. It was the absence of the biting cold. It was shelter. They lay in the dark, shoulder to shoulder, listening to the rain and the breathing of the other men. They will say, "Things about us," Maeve whispered into the darkness. "After this, after seeing me with you." "They already say them," Chayton's voice rumbled, low and close. "Words are just wind. Let them talk. It is not just words. It is my name. It is my place." "Your place is not in their town," he said. "Your place is where you stand for what is right." She turned her head on the bundled canvas she was using as a pillow. She could just make out his profile. She reached out, a small, hesitant movement, and laid her hand, not on him, but on the canvas between them. He found her hand, his fingers, calloused and strong, closed around hers. It was not a lover's caress. It was an anchor, a promise. "When this is done," he said, his voice for her alone, "when the storm breaks, we will stand together, in the sun, and we will let them talk then." She felt his other hand, a rough, gentle touch as he brushed the hair back from her face. His forehead came to rest against hers. It was a gesture of such profound, simple intimacy, of shared burden and absolute respect, that it shattered her. A single hot tear escaped her eye and was lost in the dark. "Make me yours in this wagon." It was not about this. It was about something bigger. It was about this promise, this holding. She held his hand. His forehead rested against hers, and in the dark, in the cold, surrounded by enemies and a world that wanted them dead, they slept. They were woken by a gunshot. Daylight was a gray, watery slash through the hut's single window. The rain had stopped, but the world was a sea of mud. They found the wagon. Finn hissed from the window. Maeve and Chayton were on their feet, their brief, shared peace shattered. They were just a man and a woman again, rumpled and afraid. "Voss," Chayton said, grabbing his rifle. There were 6 of them, on horseback, led by the marshal and his scar-faced deputy. They were in the basin below, circling the abandoned wagon like vultures. "They know we are on foot," Chayton said. "They know we are close." "We have to run," the doctor said, his face pale. He was shaking Jed awake. "Run where Finn said. We are on a bare ridge. They will see us in a second." "They will see what they expect to see," Maeve said, her mind, clear and sharp from the night's rest, latching onto a desperate idea. "Finn, doctor, you take Jed. Go east. Stay in the gullies. Head for the river crossing. Chayton and we will give them something else to look at." "Maeve?" "No," Chayton started. "Those mules are fast without the wagon," she said, grabbing his arm, her eyes blazing. "They are watching the mud. They are not watching the ridge. Not yet. You are the best shot. I am the best driver. We go back. We get those mules. We create a diversion. We meet you at the bridge." It was madness. It was perfect. "Go," Chayton yelled at the others. "Go now." Finn and the doctor grabbed Jed, and the 3 of them stumbled out the back of the hut, disappearing into a dip in the land. Maeve and Chayton ran, crouching low, back to the mules. The animals were huddled, miserable. Voss's men were still a quarter-mile away, their attention on the wagon. Chayton cut the mules free from their tethers with 2 slashes of his knife. Maeve grabbed the lead harness of one, Chayton the other. "Now," Maeve, Chayton yelled, and he fired his rifle. The shot was a clear, ringing declaration of war. "There," Voss yelled, pointing up at the ridge. "I will keep their heads down," Chayton said, pulling Maeve onto one of the mules, her legs dangling. He mounted the other. "You ride, as fast as this mud will let you. Ride for the river." He fired again. The deputy's hat flew off his head. The men scattered, taking cover behind the wagon. Maeve did not hesitate. She kicked the mule, screaming at the top of her lungs, and the team of 4, bound together, plunged down the ridge in a chaotic, mud-splattering spray. Chayton was right behind her, his rifle booming, the shots coming fast. He was not trying to kill. He was trying to make them afraid. Voss and his men were on them, their horses faster than the mules. But the mud was the great equalizer. It was a desperate, slow-motion chase through a landscape of brown sludge. They reached the river, a raging brown monster, swollen to twice its size. And the bridge was gone. A few splintered timbers were all that remained, washed away by the flood. Maeve pulled her mule to a halt, her heart sinking. They were trapped. Voss's men were closing in, 100 yards behind. "The cliff path," Chayton yelled, pointing. A mile upstream, there was a narrow, treacherous goat trail carved into the canyon wall. It was the old way. "They cannot follow on horseback," he said. He grabbed her hand. "We go." They abandoned the mules. Scrambling up the rocks, Finn, the doctor, and Jed were already there. Halfway up, Finn was lowering a rope, the one he had taken from the wagon. "It is a rope of trust," Maeve thought, the phrase coming to her from a half-remembered poem. They climbed. It was a vertical, heart-stopping scramble. Jed was a liability, and Finn and the doctor were struggling to haul him. Chayton moved up past Maeve, climbing like a spider, and took Jed's weight, all but carrying him. Maeve was last, her lungs burning, her hands raw. Voss and his men were at the bottom, firing up at them, the bullets spanging off the rocks around her. They were pinned. Chayton, holding Jed with one arm, fired back with his pistol. "Keep climbing. Maeve, do not stop." She pulled herself over the last ledge, collapsing onto the flat top of the mesa. They were safe. Voss was on the wrong side of the canyon, screaming in impotent fury. They did not rest. They ran. The last 10 miles to Laramie, to the district courthouse, was a blur of exhaustion. They stumbled into the courthouse, a grand brick building. At 4 o'clock, the clerk was just locking up. "Court is closed," he said, looking at their muddy, ragged forms with disdain. "He is in," a voice said. Judge Harrison, a man with a beard like Moses and eyes that missed nothing, stood in his office doorway. "What in God's name happened to you people?" he said. They told him. The doctor, a man of science, told him. Jed, a man of simple, bruised honesty, told him. And Maeve, her voice hoarse but steady, laid the papers on his desk. The ledgers, the fake map, the mercenary contract. The judge read them, his face growing darker with every page. "Silas Greeley," he said, the name sounding like a curse. "He has 48 hours. His men are massing." The judge stood up. He walked to the window. "He is a powerful man, Mr. Greeley, but I am the law, and I do not like being lied to." He took his gavel, a temporary injunction. 7 days. I am freezing the eviction order. I am freezing all of Mr. Greeley's operations in this district pending a full investigation, and I'm sending a United States Marshal, a real one, to Dry Willow, to bring me Marshal Voss in chains. It was not victory, but it was air. It was a breath. The victory lasted 12 hours. The next morning, the Laramie newspaper, a paper Silas Greeley owned, hit the streets. The headline was not about the injunction. It was Railroad Baron Halt's progress due to rumors from hysterical widow and savage lover. Maeve read it, her face pale. The story detailed her unnatural association with Chayton, her hysteria, her disloyalty. It painted her as a madwoman, a whore. The fight was not over. It had just moved to a new, uglier battlefield. Chayton found her on the hotel porch. She was holding the newspaper, her knuckles white. He stood beside her, looking out at the town. "He has the law on his side," Maeve said, her voice dead. "And he has the lies. He will win." "He has your name?" Chayton said. "He has my name. He can have them. They are just words." He put his hand over hers, the one crushing the newspaper. "We have the truth, and we have 7 days." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "And if justice fails?" "Chayton, if the lies are stronger." He held her gaze, his hand warm on hers. "If justice fails," he said, his voice quiet and absolute, "we still choose to do the right thing. We are the eagle. We are the stream. Let the flood come. We will find our way." Silas Greeley was not a man who respected the law. He was a man who bought it, shaped it, and, when it was inconvenient, he broke it. A 7-day injunction was not a shield. It was a deadline. He knew it, and Chayton knew it. They did not stay in Laramie. The real marshal, a man named Harris, would take a day to gather his men. Jed, Finn, and the doctor stayed, safe under the court's protection. But Maeve and Chayton rode back, hard and fast, using the hidden paths only Chayton knew. They had to warn the camp. They had to prepare. They arrived at Willow Creek a full day before Voss and his hired army. The valley, which should have been a sanctuary, felt exposed, its sacred air trembling with dread. Chayton's people, who had endured so much, looked at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "He will not wait for the Laramie Marshal," Chayton told the elders, his voice flat. "The paper from the judge means nothing to a man who holds a pen in one hand and a gun in the other. He will come before the 7 days are gone. He will come to erase the evidence, and we are the evidence." There was no talk of war. There was only talk of survival. Chayton's past as a warrior demanded blood, but his future as a leader demanded something more difficult: wisdom. "We will not fight them," he announced, and the decision was met with a few grumbles, but mostly with understanding. "We will not meet their violence with our own. We will not give them the massacre they want, the excuse they need. We will not stain this valley with a new war." His plan was one of defense, of non-lethal defiant survival. For a day and a night, the entire camp worked. The horses, the most valuable and symbolic of their assets, were moved deep into a hidden box canyon miles away. Driven by the young boys, the main camp was shifted back, closer to the creek, to the escape routes. On the hillsides, where the attack would surely come, Chayton and the other men worked, not digging rifle pits, but setting traps. They balanced massive piles of stones on rickety ledges, held by a single rope. They gathered every damp log, every pile of wet leaves, and stacked them in strategic positions, ready to be lit. These were not traps to kill. They were traps to confuse, to blind, and to stop. Maeve worked with the women. Her role was just as clear. She was a healer, and now, a leader. "They will come with guns," she said, her voice steady as she tore long strips of linen. "We must be ready for the wounds." She organized the older women and the teenagers, turning the largest remaining teepee into a field hospital. She set out her remaining carbolic soap, her needles, her bandages. She established a signal, a large iron bell taken from a lost cow, hung from a pole. "If they break through, one of you rings this. The sound means run, not fight. Run, to the creek and up the deer path. You do not stop." She was creating an exit, a path to the future. They were as ready as they could be. They were a people with their backs against their own sacred wall, and they were not going to meet their enemy with hate, but with cunning. The attack came at dusk, the end of the second day. Silas Greeley was not stupid. He knew the Laramie Marshal was coming. He had to end this and end it now. He had sent Voss and the 10 mercenaries, the surveyors, with one simple order: erase the camp. Voss, his pride burning from the chase, his authority challenged, was more than happy to oblige. They rode in hard, rifles raised, expecting a terrified, fleeing camp. Instead, they were met with silence, and then with smoke. Chayton gave the signal. The damp fires were lit, a thick, acrid, blinding smoke billowed up from a dozen points, settling in the valley like a heavy, choking fog. The mercenaries, strangers to this land, pulled their horses up, coughing, their eyes stinging. "It is a trick," Voss roared. "Ride through it, they are running." They spurred their horses forward, into the gray-black cloud, and that is when Chayton cut the first rope. A river of rocks, not boulders, but sharp, ankle-breaking stones, cascaded down the hillside. It hit the front line of riders. Horses screamed and reared, their footing lost. One mercenary was thrown, his arm clearly broken. Another's horse went down, trapping him. The formation was broken, the charge turning to chaos. "Forward, you cowards!" Forward, Voss, enraged, fired his rifle into the smoke. But the smoke was too thick. They were blind. They were disoriented. And they were, Chayton knew, men who were being paid, not men who were fighting for their homes. Their courage was thin. From the trees, Chayton's men, few in number but masters of their land, began to make noise. They used bird calls, owl hoots, and the sharp, high cry of the hawk, making their small numbers sound like 100. The mercenaries, believing they had ridden into an ambush, began to fall back, firing wildly into the smoke. While the battle raged, a single elegant buggy, pulled by a fine-looking horse, was driven recklessly into the camp. Not from the direction of the attack, but from the main road. It stopped near the aid station. Sadie Donovan climbed down. Her velvet dress was splattered with mud. Her hair had come undone, and her face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. But she was there. She saw Maeve, who was standing at the entrance to the teepee, watching the chaos, her hands stained with an herbal poultice. They are here," Sadie stammered, as if Maeve did not know. "Why are you here?" Sadie Maeve asked, her voice flat. "There was no time for this." "I heard," Sadie said, the words spilling out. "At the bank, Mr. Greeley was there. He was closing his accounts. He told my husband. He said, 'The bank's problems are about to be solved.'" And he laughed. I knew he was sending them. To kill you all. And you came to watch. No, Sadie's voice broke. She was weeping, her icy composure shattered. I came because I cannot live with it. She fumbled inside her cloak and pulled out a thick, leather-bound book. A second one, identical, followed. He is a thief, Sadie sobbed, thrusting the ledgers at Maeve. I thought it was just business, but it is not. This is the real set, not the one you found, the one I kept. He has been billing the railroad for 3 times the track he laid. He has been taking payments for Indian relations that were just bribes. He has stolen from the investors. He has stolen from the bank. My bank. We are ruined. It is all in there. He is not just a monster. He is a common, cheap thief. This was it. The real proof. The evidence that would not just stop Greeley in Wyoming, but would ruin him in Washington, in New York. This was the document that would bring down the entire house of cards. He has to be stopped, Sadie said, grabbing Maeve's arm. He will kill you. He will kill all of you. He cannot let this truth get out. At that moment, a figure broke through the smoke, on horseback. It was Marshal Voss. He had seen the buggy. He had seen the exchange. He had seen the ledgers pass from Sadie's hands to Maeve's. He knew, with the certainty of a cornered animal, that his life was over. Unless he could get those books. He ignored the battle. He ignored his men. He spurred his horse directly at Maeve, his face a mask of homicidal rage, his rifle leveled. Give me the books, you bitch, he screamed. Sadie screamed and fainted. Maeve, reacting on pure instinct, shoved the ledgers into her own empty medical satchel, slung it over her shoulder, and ran. Voss was off his horse in a second, shouldering his rifle to fire. Maeve dove behind a stack of supplies as the bullet splintered the wood where she had been standing. She ran toward the creek, toward the mud, the place where she knew a horse could not follow. He was on foot, right behind her, his heavy boots sucking in the mud. I will kill you, he yelled, his breath ragged. I will kill you and your savage lover. Maeve reached the creek bed, a thick, deep morass of mud from the rains. She stumbled, falling to one knee, the satchel, heavy with the ledgers, swung around. Voss was on her. He grabbed the strap, pulling her back. She twisted, falling onto her back in the mud, holding the satchel to her chest. He loomed over her, his face purple. He reversed his rifle, raising it to use it as a club, to crush her skull. No, Maeve whispered. She did not draw the hawk-carved knife to attack. She drew it to defend. As he brought the rifle butt down, she brought the knife up, the flat of the blade, not the edge, clanging against the rifle's trigger guard. The force of the blow was deflected, the rifle stock burying itself in the mud beside her head. He roared in frustration, dropping the rifle to grab the knife. He seized her wrist, his grip like iron. They struggled, 2 figures in the mud, lit by the dying, smoky light. He was too strong. He was forcing her hand back, the point of the knife moving slowly toward her own throat. This is how you die, he hissed, his face inches from hers. No, a voice said. Chayton Redhawk stood on the bank of the creek, not 10 feet away. He had seen the chase. He had followed. His rifle was leveled, not at Voss's chest, but at his head. Voss froze. He knew he was dead. He looked at Chayton, and in his eyes, there was not fear, there was only hate. Go on, Voss snarled, still holding Maeve's wrist. Do it. Be the savage I always said you were. Kill me. Chayton's finger was on the trigger. The cinder, the old, burning hate, the memory of Sand Creek, the memory of Tom, the driver, the face of his son. He held the rifle steady. You will not kill him, Maeve said, her voice a strained gasp. But her eyes locked on Chayton's. We are not them. Chayton looked from Voss's hateful face to Maeve's mud-streaked, pleading one. He looked at the man who had tried to murder her, who had tried to destroy his people, who had killed and lied. He lowered the rifle by 1 inch, and he fired. The bullet did not hit Voss, it hit the mud, an inch from his head, the explosion of filth and sound so shocking that Voss screamed, his grip on Maeve loosening in pure, reflexive terror. In that second, Chayton was on him. He did not use the rifle. He used the butt of it, a short, sharp, brutal swing that connected with Voss's temple. It was not a killing blow. It was a warrior's blow, an ending. Voss collapsed, unconscious, into the mud. Chayton stood over him, breathing heavily, his entire body trembling with the adrenaline. With the rage he had just contained, he had had the choice. He had had the right, and he had chosen mercy. He had saved his own soul. He reached down and pulled Maeve up from the mud. She was shaking, covered in filth, but she was alive. She was clutching the satchel. "It is over," Chayton said. At that moment, the sound of a new organized group of riders was heard. Not the chaotic mercenaries, but a disciplined column. Marshal Harris, the man from Laramie, had arrived. Guided by the smoke, he was flanked by 10 of his own deputies, and with him, looking grim and determined, were Reverend Gideon, Dr. Thorne, and Finn. They took in the scene, the routed mercenaries, now prisoners, being rounded up by Chayton's men, the unconscious Voss in the mud, the weeping, mud-covered Sadie, who was just now coming to, and Maeve, standing beside Chayton, holding a satchel as if it were her own child. "Marshal Voss," Harris said, his voice like iron, "I believe you are under arrest." A cry from the edge of the camp. "He is getting away." Silas Greeley. He had been watching from his private buggy on the main road. He had seen it all collapse. He was whipping his horse, trying to get his buggy turned, to flee back to the railroad, back to his world. Marshal Harris did not hesitate. "You men," he yelled at Finn and the doctor, "you are deputized. Stop him." It was Finn, the cowboy, who sprinted, cut off Greeley's horse, and grabbed the bridle, the buggy skidding to a halt. Silas Greeley, the man who owned senators, sat there, his fine wool suit now splattered with mud. He was a small man, after all, and he was, at last, finished. The house of God had become a house of judgment. In the 2 days since the arrest, the town of Dry Willow had been transformed. Marshal Harris, a man who believed in the letter of the law, had worked with the speed of a righteous telegraph. He had sent for Judge Harrison, who, seeing the magnitude of the case, had agreed to convene an immediate circuit court. The church was the only logical and the only neutral place. The pews were packed, standing room only, with the entire population of Dry Willow, ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, and the silent, watchful presence of Chayton's people, who stood in a row at the back, their faces grim. At the front, where the pulpit should be, a heavy oak table served as the judge's bench. A jury of 12 men, a mix of ranchers from the high country and merchants from the town, sat in the choir box, their faces unreadable. At the defendant's table, Silas Greeley sat, no longer the paternal benefactor, but a small, pinched man in a rumpled suit. He was flanked by a high-priced lawyer from Laramie, a man with a silver tongue and cold eyes. Beside them sat Marshal Voss, his head bandaged, his hands manacled. He just looked dull. The rage in him burned down to a bitter, gray ash. Marshal Harris, acting as prosecutor, stood first. His voice was not emotional. It was a hammer, and each word was a nail. "This is not a case about land, Your Honor," he began. "It is a case about lies, the lies that murdered Tom, the stage driver, the lies that burned this town's provisions, the lies that led to an armed insurrection against the people of this territory. And we, the people, will now present the truth." He began, piece by piece, to build his case. He laid the physical evidence on a table for the jury to see: the brass, Army-issue shell casing, the scrap of leather from a United States cavalry bridle. He called Jedediah, the station master, to the stand. Jed was no longer a stammering, terrified man. His bruising was faded, and his voice was clear. He told them, simply and honestly, about seeing Voss and his deputies ride out, hours before dawn, toward the pass. He told them about his arrest and the false warrant Maeve had found. Greeley's lawyer tried to object. This is the word of a known associate of the accused, a man arrested for conspiracy himself. A conspiracy, Judge Harrison said, his voice a low rumble, for which the warrant was unsigned, and which, it appears, was fabricated by the arresting officer. The objection is overruled. Let the man speak. Jed's testimony was damning, but it was nothing compared to the next witness. The prosecution calls Mrs. Sadie Donovan. A shocked murmur went through the crowd. Sadie walked to the stand, not as the icy queen of the town, but as a pale, subdued woman in a simple gray dress. Her husband, the banker, watched her, his face a mask of shame. She did not weep. She did not make excuses. She took the oath, and then, in a voice that was quiet but carried to every corner of the church, she confessed. She laid the real ledgers, her private set, on the table. "These are the true books," she said, her hands not trembling. "The ones I kept, I was a part of it. I helped Mr. Greeley promote the Prosperity Fund, knowing the bank was failing, knowing the silver mine was a lie. I did it to protect my status, my home." She then proceeded to walk the court through the fraud. She showed them the payments to a holding company, which were then funneled to Voss and his deputies. She showed them the entries for Indian relations, which were used to buy the silence of telegraph operators and politicians. She showed them, in Greeley's own neat handwriting, the false billing to the railroad, the millions of dollars stolen from investors back east. When she finished, there was a dead, cold silence in the church. She had not just implicated Greeley. She had implicated herself, her husband, and the entire civilized structure of the town. Greeley's lawyer rose. A snake in a good suit. He knew he could not challenge the ledgers. They were a confession in ink. So he attacked the witness. "Mrs. Donovan," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "you have painted a terrible picture of yourself. A woman who, by her own admission, has lied and cheated and conspired. Why should this jury believe you now? Is it not true you are trying to save your own skin, to lay the blame for your own failures at the feet of a great man like Mr. Greeley?" Sadie looked at him. "I have no skin left to save, sir. My reputation is gone. My bank is gone. My life, as I knew it, is over. I am here. I am here because I saw a woman, Mrs. O'Hara, who had nothing, and she was willing to die for the truth. I, who had everything, was willing to kill for a lie. I am simply trying to balance the book." The lawyer had no reply. He turned his venom on the next witness. The prosecution calls Maeve O'Hara. Maeve walked to the stand. She was wearing her own simple dress, the cloak left behind. She felt the eyes of the entire town on her. The lawyer did not let Harris ask his questions. He took the lead, launching his cross-examination immediately. "Mrs. O'Hara," he sneered, "you are the center of this, are you not? The hysterical widow? The passionate friend of the red man?" "Objection," Harris said. "I will rephrase," the lawyer said, holding up a hand. "Mrs. O'Hara, is it not true that you have been seen, on numerous occasions, alone with the Cheyenne man, Chayton Redhawk?" Maeve's face flushed, but her voice was steady. "We were gathering evidence." "Evidence? Is that what you call it? Is it not true you were found in a small, abandoned hut with him, having spent the night, while you were being pursued for a crime?" "Objection," Harris roared. "The witness's character is not on trial." "It is entirely on trial," the lawyer shouted back. "This entire case rests on her word, on her evidence. We must know the nature of her bias, is she not? In fact, an outcast, a woman of questionable loyalties, who has poisoned this town against its greatest benefactor. Is it not true, Mrs. O'Hara, that you hate this town, and you would do anything to see it, and Mr. Greeley, Destroyed. Before Maeve could answer, a voice came from the pews. She does not. Reverend Gideon stood up, his face no longer pale or weak, but filled with a righteous fire. I object, sir, he said, not to the judge, but to the lawyer. You have put this woman's character on trial, so let us speak of it. I saw this woman stand in my own church, in this very aisle, and speak the truth when I, her pastor, was too afraid. I saw her stand down a mob, alone. Her loyalty is not questionable. It is just inconvenient, for it is loyal to the truth, and not to the dollar. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Reverend, you are out of order. I am, sir, the Reverend said, and I will sit, but I have spoken my piece. The lawyer, furious, turned back to Maeve, but his momentum was broken. Judge Harrison looked at him. Do you have any relevant questions, counselor, or do you just wish to sling mud? The lawyer, defeated, waved a hand, no further questions. The prosecution, Harris said, his voice full of satisfaction, calls Chayton Redhawk to the stand. If Sadie's testimony had caused a murmur, this caused a gasp. The town watched as Chayton walked down the aisle. He was not wearing beads or feathers. He was wearing clean hide trousers and a simple linen shirt. He was a man. He walked to the stand. Objection! The lawyer was on his feet. This is a farce. This man is a savage. He is not a citizen. He cannot take the oath. He is not a competent witness. Judge Harrison's eyes were like chips of ice. Counselor, this is a territorial court. This man and his people are on this territory. He has been accused by your clients of murder, arson, and insurrection. He will be heard. Your objection is noted, and it is overruled. The clerk, uncertain, held out the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth? Chayton did not touch the book. He looked at the judge. I cannot swear on your book, but I will speak the truth. My word is my oath. The judge nodded. Let the record show the witness has affirmed. Proceed, Marshal. Harris was simple. Mr. Redhawk, please tell the court what you saw on the day of the attack on the stage. Chayton's voice was quiet. It was not a speech. It was a simple telling. He spoke of tracking Voss's men. He spoke of the army boots, the shod horses. He spoke of the ambush. Then Greeley's lawyer stood up. And why should we believe you, a man who has fought against the United States Army, a man who is, by his own admission, a warrior? Chayton turned his gaze to the lawyer, and then he turned to the jury. I have been a warrior, he said, his voice resonating in the hushed church. I have seen the cost of war. I have seen the treaties, the paper promises broken. I saw my people, my family, die for nothing. He was not speaking to the lawyer anymore. He was speaking to the town. We were told this was a new way, a way of law. We tried to walk this path. We did not attack your coach. We did not burn your food. We did not seek war. War was brought to our homes by the men sitting at that table. He looked at Silas Greeley. This man told you there was silver in our valley. He lied. He told you we were your enemy. He lied. The man who lies to you to steal from his own people. He is the one who is the savage. He is the one who is your enemy. He looked at the jury. We are not your enemy. We all drink from the same river. We all breathe the same air. We are trying to protect our home. The same as you. There is a path for all of us to walk together, but it cannot be a path of lies. He was done. He stepped down, and the silence he left behind was total. Marshal Harris had one last witness. The prosecution calls Mr. Thomas Cole. It was the mercenary, the man whose arm had been broken by Chayton's rock slide. He walked to the stand, his arm in a clean sling, set by Dr. Thorne, Voss, and Greeley, who had been listening with contempt, now looked up, their face pale with shock. Mr. Cole, Harris said, you were part of the group that attacked the stage. Yes, sir. And you were part of the group hired to attack the Willow Creek encampment. Yes, sir. Who hired you? The mercenary took a deep breath. At first, it was just the marshal. Voss, he paid us. But the day of the attack, the big boss came. He gave the orders. Who was the big boss? Mr. Cole. The mercenary pointed a finger, not at Voss, but directly at Silas Greeley. He did. Silas Greeley. He told us. "Clear the valley," he said. "I want it done by morning. No witnesses, no survivors. I want a clean start." He promised us a bonus, $500 each, for a clean start. The church erupted. Judge Harrison had to bang his gavel for a full minute. "Why are you testifying, Mr. Cole Harris asked. When the room was quiet, "You are implicating yourself." "I know, but when I was took after the rocks, I was in a bad way. My arm was busted. I thought they was going to finish me. But that woman, Mrs. O'Hara, she gave me water, even after I had been hunting her. And the doc, he set my arm proper, saved it. They was merciful. And I ain't no murderer of women and children. Not for $500? Not for anything." That was the end. The lawyer for Silas Greeley offered no defense. He simply sat down and put his head in his hands. The jury did not leave the box. The foreman, a cattle rancher Maeve had seen in the saloon, stood up. "Your Honor, we do not need to deliberate." "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Harrison asked, though his face already knew the answer. "We have, on all counts, fraud, conspiracy, incitement to riot, organized violence, attempted murder for both defendants. We find them guilty." A single unified cheer went up from the town. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "Order, order. The court will now pass sentence." He looked at Voss. "Marshal Voss, you have betrayed the public trust. You have betrayed your office. You have betrayed your fellow man. You are sentenced to 20 years hard labor." He then turned to Silas Greeley, who looked small and gray. "Mr. Greeley, you are a man of influence, and you use that influence to poison this land. You turn neighbor against neighbor. You are a cancer. You are sentenced to 30 years in the federal penitentiary, and all your assets, all your holdings, and all your claims in this territory are hereby forfeit." He was not done. He looked to the back of the room, at Chayton and the Cheyenne elders. "This court cannot undo the pain and the loss, but it can stop the theft. The Willow Creek Valley, the land at the heart of this crime, is hereby designated a protected territorial reserve. It will not be open to settlement. It will not be open to development. It's stewardship." And here he looked at the jury foreman, and then at Chayton, "will be a shared responsibility. A council, made of the Cheyenne elders and the county supervisors, will be formed to protect it. It is a new path. Let us pray we are wise enough to walk it." He banged the gavel, a final, definitive crack of wood. And at that exact moment, as if summoned, the heavy iron bell in the church steeple began to ring. It was not a slow toll for a service. It was a loud, joyous, chaotic peal, rung by a half-dozen town boys who had climbed the tower. Someone threw open the church doors. A shaft of warm, bright sunlight cut through the dusty air. The false winter, the storm of lies, had broken. Outside, on the church steps, the last of the snow had melted. And from the cold, wet earth, the first tiny, brave, green shoots of new grass were pushing their way toward the light. The trial did not end the world. It just ended the one they had known. In the days that followed, a strange, exhausted quiet settled over Dry Willow. The town, having been pushed to the very brink of its own destruction, was now faced with the difficult, unglamorous work of rebuilding. And not just the burned-out shell of the provisions warehouse. They had to rebuild trust. They had to rebuild a future. The sound of hammers, which had once been a harbinger of false progress, now became a sound of repair. The first building to go up was not, in fact, the new warehouse. It was something else. It started at the edge of the valley, on the bluff overlooking Willow Creek. a piece of land that was neither the town nor the reservation, but a bridge between them. Maeve O'Hara was there, directing the work. She had traded her cloak for an apron, her medical satchel for a set of plans sketched on the back of a useless railroad bond. They were building a single long, low building from fresh-cut pine. It was not grand, but it was solid. One side was a clinic, with 2 beds and clean, whitewashed walls, funded by a collection taken by Reverend Gideon. The other side was a school. This was Maeve's true purpose, the thing she had been moving toward without knowing it. She was a healer, yes, but she was also an interpreter. She had stood between 2 worlds and had refused to let them destroy each other. Now, she would build a place where they could meet. The first students were already there, a half-dozen children from the Cheyenne camp and a few of the poorer ranchers' children, all sitting on blankets, learning a new alphabet. It was a bilingual class. Maeve taught them English letters. Chayton's son, the boy whose legs she had set, sat proudly, teaching the white children the Cheyenne words for river, horse, and friend. Maeve O'Hara, the outsider, the Irish woman, the widow, had finally found her place. It was not a place she had been given. It was one she had built, with her own hands, on the ashes of a lie. The second act of rebuilding came from a more unlikely source. Sadie Donovan had not been arrested. Her confession on the stand, Marshall Harris had argued, had been a public service, and her testimony was the reason Greeley's entire enterprise had collapsed. But she was a pariah. Her husband, his bank ruined and his name a disgrace, had taken a train back east, a hollow man. Sadie stayed. She sold her fine house. She sold her buggy, her velvet dresses, her opera glasses. She sold it all, and with the small amount of capital she had left. She did not buy a ticket to join her husband. She appeared at the first town council meeting, held in the newly swept church. She was wearing a simple calico dress, her hair pulled back. She looked smaller, but more solid. She stood up, and the room went silent. "I will not ask for your forgiveness," she said, her voice clear, no longer cutting, but quiet. "I do not deserve it. I stood by in the name of profit and pride, and I watched as good men were slandered and a good woman was nearly lynched." She looked at Maeve, who was sitting in the back, and Maeve simply nodded. "Words are not enough." Sadie continued, "My apology is not in what I say. It is in what I will do. I have sold my assets. With the proceeds, I am establishing a new town fund, not a prosperity fund, a credit union, a place where any citizen, white or Cheyenne, can get a fair loan to rebuild, to buy seed for a crop, to buy lumber for a home. The interest will be 1%, just enough to keep the books. This is my penance, and my promise." She sat down. No one clapped. It was not a moment for applause. It was a somber, serious contract. Sadie Donovan, who had been the symbol of their greed, had just become the architect of their recovery. The town began to change. The lines that had been drawn in iron and blood began to blur. The first and most visible change was the market. It was held on the flat ground between the town and the new school. Every Saturday, Finn, the cowboy, brought in venison. The Cheyenne women brought intricate beadwork and strong, woven baskets. Ranchers who had once hoarded their goods now bartered for them. Money was less important than the simple, human act of exchange. The fall harvest that year was not one of bitterness, but of celebration. It was a shared festival. The white settlers brought their pies and their fiddles. The Cheyenne brought drums, and they taught the town their dance of gratitude. Reverend Gideon, his face beaming, stood by the creek, the same creek that had been a place of conflict. He stood beside the old Cheyenne matriarch, the one who had called Maeve medicine. "She calls it the stream of life," the Reverend told his congregation, who were gathered in the open air, "and she is right. We have, all of us, been thanking the sky, but we forgot to thank the earth. We forgot to thank the water. We are all here because this stream is here, and we must protect it, together." It was a sermon, and it was a promise. The deep resonant sound of the Cheyenne drums mingled with the high, thin notes of an Irish fiddle, and for the first time, the sound was not a cacophony. It was a new kind of music. In the middle of this new healing world, Maeve and Chayton had to find their own peace. The danger was over. The urgent, desperate need that had thrown them together was gone. They were left with the quiet, terrifying reality of the promise they had made in the line shack. They had been seen as a scandal. The Laramie paper had made them infamous. But in Dry Willow, they were simply Maeve and Chayton, the healer and the leader, the stream and the hawk. He found her one evening at the new school. She was cleaning the chalk slates, the last of the children gone, the room filled with the golden, dusty light of the plain sunset. He did not enter. He just stood in the doorway, a tall shadow, watching her. She turned, a small smile on her face. The weariness was still there, but the fear was gone. The council met, he said. His voice was low. He was now the head of the new Joint Commission, the official steward of the valley. And she asked, "The railroad wants to come back, a new company. They want to negotiate for a new route around the valley, not through it." "What did you tell them?" "I told them we would think about it. The world is coming. Maeve, we cannot stop it, but we can meet it on our terms, not theirs." This was the new Chayton, not the warrior, haunted by the cinder of his past, not the mediator, forced to beg for scraps. He was a statesman. He had let go of the guilt, the old wars. He was fighting for the future, not the past. "You look tired," he said, finally stepping into the room. "I am tired," she said, putting down the rag. "But it is a good kind of tired. It is the tired of building, not the tired of running." He stood in front of her. He did not touch her. Not yet. I am not what you are used to." "Maeve O'Hara," he said, and it was the closest she had ever heard him come to uncertainty. "I am not a man of houses or banks. My world is the sky and the earth." "Your world is here," she said, her voice soft. She placed her hand on his chest, over his heart, "with your son, with your people, with me." He covered her hand with his own. The spark that had been a desperate anchor in the mud was now a slow, steady, and profound warmth. "I told you we would stand in the sun," he said. "So we are," she whispered. "The festival is tomorrow," he said. "Our people will be there. Your people will be there. It is time. Let us tell them. Let us show them." It was not a proposal. It was a statement of fact, a confirmation. The next day, at the Harvest Festival, in front of the entire mingled town, they stood together. It was not a formal announcement. Reverend Gideon did not say a word. The Cheyenne elders did not make a speech. Instead, in the middle of the celebration, Chayton, in his finest buckskin, simply walked to Maeve, who was wearing a clean blue dress, her hair tied back. He offered her his hand. She took it. He then presented her with a gift. It was not a diamond ring. It was a bracelet, one his own mother had worn, of the finest, most intricate blue and white beadwork. He slid it onto her wrist. Maeve, in turn, presented him with her gift. She had spent a week on it. It was a new leather sheath for his hawk-carved knife, but she had tooled it with a small, awkward hand. On one side was the hawk, and on the other, a simple, winding Celtic knot, the symbol of her own people, the stream and the hawk, bound together. He took the knife, slid it into the sheath, and fastened it to his belt. He looked at her, and his eyes, which had held so much war, were now clear. They just stood there, holding hands, in the middle of the town, and the town smiled. They raised a cheer. The music swelled, and the celebration continued around them. A partnership, not a possession, an alliance. That evening, as the sun set, the sky was a riot of color. The nature of the valley, which had been so brutal, now seemed to be at peace. The great, shaggy herds of buffalo had been seen on the horizon, their slow, steady return a sign that the land itself was healing. Maeve stood with Chayton on the bluff, watching the light fade. She was no longer an outsider. She was the heart of this new place. They had learned, all of them, the hard way, that justice without compassion was just another kind of violence, that love, real adult love, was not about finding a person to save you. It was about finding a person to stand with, while you saved each other, and while you saved the community around you. A high, clear cry echoed across the valley. A single red-tailed hawk, a kinsman to the one on Chayton's knife, caught the last thermal of the evening, soaring in a wide, triumphant circle over the sacred land, over the school, over the town, a symbol of a new kind of freedom, one that was not wild and alone, but one that was bound to the earth and to the people below. The wagon, the one that had been their prison and their refuge, did not rot in the mud. Finn and Jed, in an act of what Finn called profound, stubborn foolishness, spent a week with a team of borrowed oxen and a great deal of new lumber, and they hauled its broken skeleton back to town. They did not just repair it, they transformed it. They rebuilt the frame with seasoned oak. They gave it new, sturdy wheels. The canvas cover was replaced, not with a patch, but with a whole, clean, white sheet, the kind used for schooners. Inside, where they had huddled in the cold mud, there were now clean wooden shelves, a small water cask, and a cot that folded against the wall. It was no longer a freight wagon. It was Maeve's clinic. It was a mobile, rolling office of healing, ready to be taken up into the high ranch lands, or to the Cheyenne camp, or to wherever sickness laid a hand. It was a symbol of their journey. Its wheels now meant not for escape, but for service. Maeve stood inside it, the new wood smelling of pine and promise. She took the hawk-carved knife, the one she had carried, the one that had blocked the blow from Voss. Its time as a weapon, a desperate tool of defense, was over. She hung it from a leather thong on one of the central roof beams, not as a threat, but as a reminder. It was a symbol of the courage it had taken to get here. Their wedding was not one day, but two. It was not one ceremony, but a joining of two worlds, as final and as binding as the new treaty for the valley. The first was by the water. They stood on the banks of Willow Creek, the same creek that had been their barrier and their battlefield. The old matriarch, Chayton's grandmother, presided. There were no books, no contracts. The entire village, Cheyenne and white, stood as witnesses. Reverend Gideon was there, not as a pastor, but as a friend, his head bowed in respect. The old woman did not ask them to promise to love, or honor, or obey. She spoke in her own language, and Maeve, who understood it now as well as she did English, knew the vow was deeper. She asked them to promise to be a good partner, to be a shield for the other's heart, to protect the community, to raise their children to honor the earth, and to choose each other, not just on this day, but on every day, for all the days to come. Chayton, in his finest beaded buckskin, took Maeve's hand. He spoke his vow in Cheyenne. His voice, which had commanded warriors, now soft, Maeve, in a simple blue dress with Sadie Donovan's beaded bracelet on her wrist, spoke hers back to him. First in the Cheyenne she had learned, and then in the Irish of her own ancestors. It was a vow of equals. The second ceremony was in the town. Judge Harrison had returned for the occasion. He stood on the steps of the new schoolhouse, his black robe looking strange and formal in the afternoon sun. He held the law book of the territory. This was the contract, the promise to the new world. By the authority vested in me by the laws of the United States and the territory of Wyoming, his voice boomed, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The celebration that followed lasted until the moon was high. It was a feast of roast venison and cornbread, of wild berries and Sadie's cautiously offered pies. Finn played his fiddle, the high, fast, wild music of Ireland. The Cheyenne brought their drums, the deep, steady heartbeat of the earth. And for the first time, the two sounds wove together, creating a new song, one that had never been heard in this valley before. There was dancing. There was a great, blazing bonfire that lit the faces of both peoples, no longer in anger, but in shared, joyous light. The new world, however, did not wait. A month later, the railroad came calling again. It was a different man this time, a nervous lawyer from Omaha, not a baron. He met with the new Willow Creek Stewardship Council. Chayton Redhawk, sitting at the head of the table, was not the man he had been. He was not a warrior. He was not a victim. He was a leader. He listened patiently as the man laid out the new proposal. "The new line will not touch the valley, Mr. Redhawk," the lawyer said, shuffling his papers. "We will follow the outer ridge, a full 10 miles to the north, but we will need water access from the upper river." Chayton, with Reverend Gideon on one side and the old rancher who had been the jury foreman on the other, looked at the maps. They talked for hours. They spoke of water rights. They spoke of the buffalo migration paths. They spoke of hiring local labor from the town and from the camp. In the end, Chayton signed the agreement. The railroad would come. It was a promise of a new future, a future they had all agreed would arrive, but it would arrive on their terms. It would respect the land. It would respect the people. The long iron arm of progress would bend, this time, to the will of the community it served. The seasons turned. The harsh, false winter of greed had given way to a true, strong spring. Dawn broke over Willow Creek, the light painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. In the fields by the water, a group of children were already playing. They were a mix of dark, shining hair and pale, freckled faces. They were laughing, their voices high and clear, as they chased a small, barking dog. Their game was not cowboys and Indians. They were just children, playing by a stream. A sound, clear and sharp, cut through the morning air, the single iron bell, ringing from the new schoolhouse on the bluff. The children stopped their game, gathered their things, and began the slow, laughing walk up the hill together. From a ridge above, 2 riders sat on their horses, watching. Maeve O'Hara, her hair now tied in a simple braid, sat her horse as easily as if she had been born to it. She looked at the valley below, her valley, and her face was filled with a deep, quiet peace. Chayton Redhawk sat beside her, his hand resting on his saddle horn. He was not looking at the children. He was looking at his wife. She turned to him, and she smiled. "They will be late," she said. "They will learn," he replied, a small smile of his own touching his lips. "They have a good teacher." He turned his horse. "We should ride. The herd was seen near the high pass. We should make sure they are not disturbed." He was a man whose freedom was now defined by his duty. Maeve's love was not a thing to possess him, but a thing that had set him free. And his love for her was not a cage, but a foundation. Justice, they had found, was not a final act, but a daily, difficult, and beautiful practice. It was a bridge. The wind moved through the tall grasses of the valley, and high above, a red-tailed hawk caught the morning sun, its shadow passing over the 2 riders. The West was not a place of endless violence. It was, Maeve knew, a place of endless possibility, a place that could be better, a place they, together, would make better. They rode down the ridge toward the new mobile clinic, the white canvas of the wagon gleaming in the new day. They stopped, and Chayton reached across the small space between their horses. Maeve met his hand, their fingers, calloused and strong, laced together. They looked out at the valley, a new season, and a new life, and they rode on. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious to know, where in the world are you listening from? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on Maeve and Chayton's journey. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to the channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support the channel, please hit that hype button. It helps get these stories out to more folks, and it means the world to me.